You're watching All 24 News World News Program. Next up are the headlines. Trump urges Iran to surrender. Tehran vows escalation if diplomacy fails, and Pakistan continues mediation efforts. Also on news, Sudanese army strikes RSF positions and downs another drone in Kordofan. Algeria reaffirms support for Sudan's sovereignty and unity amid African backing for national dialogue and unrestricted humanitarian truce. Next up, Ebola outbreak kills more than 2,300 in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Government declares a deadly outbreak and the UN warns of a growing humanitarian crisis. Death toll rises as Moscow and Kiev trade drone attacks. Russia says it struck 2 cargo ships at Ukrainian ports, while the EU prepares its largest sanctions package against Russia since the start of the war. Welcome back to the details. First off, in our news tonight, U.S. President Donald Trump says Washington is not seeking to extend its memorandum of understanding with Iran, while reiterating that his goal is to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. Speaking from the White House, Trump said Iran's nuclear program would take a long time to recover after last summer's U.S. strikes, adding that the U.S. blockade remains highly effective.
Well, they want to make a deal, but they're not going to make the kind of a deal that I feel is necessary. Look, we're in there for one reason. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. You understand that? Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and they won't have a nuclear weapon. And right now, them building one after what we did previously with the B-2 bombers, going to be a long time behalf. But Iran cannot have. It's very simple. They can't have a nuclear weapon.
U.S. President Donald Trump has called on Iran to raise the white flag and surrender, claiming he has a back channel to Iranian Revolutionary Guard officials. Trump said Iran is on its last legs and vowed to maintain the U.S. naval blockade and economic pressure. Iran's Revolutionary Guard denied the claim, calling Trump's statements an illusion and rejecting any secret talks. In response, a senior Iranian official says Tehran will escalate tensions in the Strait of Hormuz and across the region if diplomatic efforts with Washington fail. The official told Reuters that Iran is shifting from a defensive to a more offensive approach and will not allow the U.S. naval blockade to continue indefinitely. He said Iran will also communicate its timeline to Washington and regional countries through mediators. Meanwhile, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai says the Memorandum of Understanding with the United States does not include a 60-day deadline. He said the period only covers talks on sanctions relief and the nuclear issue. Baghai accused Washington of undermining efforts toward a lasting deal, stressing that Tehran does not make decisions under deadlines or threats.
For a long time, based on our assessments of various scenarios, including the possibility that the United States might carry on with its evil actions against Iran in different ways, the necessary preparations and precautions have been put in place.
Also, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai has accused regional and international parties of trying to derail talks with Oman over maritime security in the Strait of Hormuz. He said the negotiations are moving slowly due to the complexity of the issues and the involvement of multiple parties, while warning that competing interests are creating additional obstacles.
Diplomatic talks with Oman are ongoing, but they are taking a long time and progressing slowly due to the highly complex and interconnected nature of this issue and files under discussion. This ongoing negotiating process also faces additional challenges and obstacles, including conflicting interests and involvement of multiple parties. We have also observed efforts by regional and international actors seeking to undermine and disrupt these understandings and derail efforts toward rapprochement.
Amid this, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif says Islamabad will continue efforts to promote dialogue between Iran and the United States in a bid to achieve lasting regional peace. He said Pakistan will keep diplomatic channels open, calling them the best way to resolve outstanding issues. Sharif also praised President Donald Trump for helping avert what he described as a potential nuclear catastrophe in South Asia. Beyond that, Iran's economy is facing mounting pressure as businesses across Tehran struggle with rising costs, disrupted trade, and the deepening economic fallout from the war. Kermisfai reports now.
The economic impact of the war is increasingly being felt in Tehran, with businesses and consumers facing financial pressure. Here in the Grand Bazaar, one of Iran's main commercial centers, many Iranians fear that continued disruptions to trade, coupled with Washington's threat of further economic measures, could drive prices even higher in the months ahead.
Now, many of the neighboring shopkeepers, those who rent, are handing back their shops because they actually cannot keep them running. If the situation remains as it is in the near future, no route for the entry of goods is found, undoubtedly from October onwards, the price of products will rise significantly because most of the products are imported.
The Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has acknowledged that the economic crisis is becoming harder to contain. He pointed to disrupted trade and falling oil revenues as key challenges weighing in on the country's finances.
The issue of livelihoods that our brother is talking about, the rise in the prices that he's talking about, well, that is natural. Previously, we used to bring goods by ship, but now they have to travel the entire route before reaching us. The cost of the finished products has gone up. Our income has also decreased. We used to sell oil, but now we cannot sell it. They have destroyed a number of factories.
For traders here, the challenge is no longer simply about making sales. It is about keeping businesses operating as conditions remain uncertain.
Elsewhere, Houthi forces say they attacked a vessel and 4 accompanying boats off Yemen's Muka coast with ballistic missiles, claiming the ship was destroyed and several boats sunk or damaged. Meanwhile, Yemen's army said the Houthis launched 2 ballistic missiles toward Muka and the Bab al-Mandab Strait. The UN Human Rights Chief has warned of the risk of a wider conflict, urging all sides to de-escalate. Turning to Gaza now, 2 Palestinians have died from injuries sustained in Zionist airstrikes on Khan Yunis and Deir al-Balah, according to medical sources. Occupation forces also carried out fresh airstrikes and artillery fire on Gaza City and Khan Yunis early Monday. Gaza's health ministry says violations of the ceasefire have killed 1,265 Palestinians and wounded more than 4,100 others. Meanwhile, Hamas says it has agreed to the roadmap for the second phase of Trump's Gaza ceasefire plan. Following talks with mediators and guarantors in Egypt, the group urged them to ensure Israel fulfills its commitments, including a permanent ceasefire, full withdrawal from Gaza Strip, sustained humanitarian aid, and the start of reconstruction. Still in Gaza, losing a limb is only the beginning of a much longer struggle. For amputees like Omar, severe shortages of prosthetic materials are making the journey back to the independence even harder. Here's Jenny with more.
Every morning, Omar takes the same route, a few steps out of his tent, then a short walk down the beach. He comes here to look at the sea for a few minutes before heading back to his tent. For almost a year now, his crutches have been his only way of getting around. Omar lost his right leg. Since then, his mother has been taking him from one hospital to another, hoping to find a solution that could give him back some independence. For Omar to finally put his crutches aside, he needs a prosthetic leg, but getting one is not that simple.
I dream of living a good life in a safe place and having a prosthetic leg so I can walk normally and play football with my friends.
We have been following up with the prosthetic center, but the materials needed for his prosthetic joint are still not available. His right leg was amputated above the knee. It's been nearly a year now that we have been going from one hospital to another and to the prosthetic center.
Prosthetists are doing their best with what they have. They improvise, they reuse materials, they adapt what they can and build wherever is possible locally. But some parts simply cannot be replaced. There are local alternatives, but they come with serious limitations.
The war has caused thousands of amputations, while Israel is preventing specialized materials from entering Gaza. We use locally available solutions, but they cannot replace components made abroad, especially when it comes to flexibility and durability.
And for patients, those limitations are felt every day. The prosthesis can be heavier, less durable, and harder to use for everyday activities. And then there is the wait, often months longer.
We hope better prosthetic materials will become available. Prosthetic technology abroad is much more advanced. Our situation would be much better if these materials were allowed into Gaza, or if we could receive treatment abroad.
Still, despite the shortage of materials and the struggle to access prosthetic limbs, patients keep moving forward, step by step, with a smile and with the hope of getting back some of the mobility that the genocide has taken away from them.
Elsewhere in the Middle East, occupation forces have made new incursions into southern Lebanon, accompanied by artillery fire on border towns and villages. Lebanon's national news agency said troops surrounded areas around Mais el-Jabal and advanced toward Khiyam, firing on several homes. Meanwhile, President Joseph Aoun reaffirmed Lebanon's support for extending the UNIFIL mission, calling its continued presence essential for stability and coordination with the Lebanese army.
UNIFIL's presence in the south is important for many reasons. It helps keep people in their villages and towns and strengthens stability and cooperation and coordination with the Lebanese army. Our first option is to extend UNIFIL's mandate. If that doesn't happen, our second option is to adopt a formula that ensures the continued presence of international forces in the south within the required legal framework.
Turning to Sudan now, the Sudanese army says it has fully secured Bakuri in the Blue Nile region, denying any RSF presence there. It also reported strikes on RSF positions near Kormuk, close to the Ethiopian border, claiming heavy losses. Meanwhile, the army said it shot down another RSF strategic drone in North Kordofan, the second such operation in less than 24 hours. Meanwhile, the African Union Peace and Security Council, chaired by Algeria, has begun a field mission to Sudan to support peace and stability efforts. The delegation held talks with Sudanese officials, political parties, and civil society groups, while Algeria reaffirmed its support for Sudan's sovereignty, unity, and stability.
I had the honor of convening the position of the African Union Peace and Security Council, which reaffirms its commitment to respecting the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and national unity of Sudan, as well as to continuing its support for the Sudanese people in their legitimate aspirations to restore peace, security, stability, and development, and to establish democratic governance. The meeting addressed the current situation in Sudan, with the African Union Peace and Security Council expressing its deep concern over the continued armed conflict and its devastating consequences, including the heavy loss of life, widespread destruction of infrastructure, erosion of development gains, and the grave humanitarian crisis facing the Sudanese people.
Also, Algeria, as chair of the African Union Peace and Security Council, has called for a humanitarian truce in Sudan to pave the way for a comprehensive ceasefire, unrestricted aid delivery, and inclusive national dialogue.
Regarding foreign interference, I reiterated the firm position of the African Union Peace and Security Council, which condemns in the strongest terms any interference in Sudan, as such interference further fuels the conflict. I also expressed the Council's rejection of any attempt to establish parallel entities or government that would undermine Sudan's unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity.
Turning now to Congo, the Ebola death toll in the Democratic Republic of Congo has surpassed 2,300 with nearly 5,000 confirmed cases. Authorities say the current outbreak is the deadliest in the country's history, with a fatality rate of around 47%. As the outbreak spreads, the United Nations has issued an urgent warning of the rapidly spreading Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where deaths are occurring every 30 minutes. The UN says millions more could be at risk and calls for urgent action to provide health care, clean water, and sanitation. Meanwhile, Doctors Without Borders has warned that the focus on Ebola could overshadow other health and humanitarian crises in eastern Congo. The group says measles, cholera, and malaria outbreaks continue, alongside the impact of armed conflict, creating what it calls overlapping crises.
We warn that the response to the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo must not come at the expense of other health and humanitarian crises in the east of the country. Measles, cholera, and malaria continue to spread, compounded by the impact of conflict-related violence. North Kivu and South Kivu provinces are facing multiple overlapping crises, as armed conflict has displaced communities, disturbed vaccination campaigns, and limited access to safe drinking water and health care.
Turning to North Africa, the Summer University in Amputees province in Algeria, activists and experts highlighted the role of civil society in supporting the Sahrawi cause and strengthening solidarity. Participants also discussed democratic institutions and the contribution of civil society to nation building and raising awareness of the Sahrawi cause internationally.
Today,
representatives of the Sahrawi Republic and the Polisario Front attended the Summer University focusing on the experience of Sahrawi civil society and its ability to build networks, as well as its capacity to advocate for the Sahrawi cause internally through institutional development at the social, economic, organizational, and administrative levels. The university also addressed the role of Sahrawi civil society under occupation, particularly its advocacy for human rights in the occupied Sahrawi territories, its efforts to expose human rights violations, and its role within the diaspora by turning capitals around the world into platforms for advocating the Sahrawi cause. This university holds particular importance in the context of the Sahrawi revolution as a space for sharing experiences, strengthening civil society's capacities, and coordinating efforts in support of the Sahrawi cause. Today, the Sahrawi administration's efforts complement the official effort. We have just returned from participating in the World Social Forum in Benin, where Sahrawi civil society was represented, along with the cause and right of the Sahrawi people.
Also, Morocco's Democratic Way party has rejected Rabat's narrative on Western Sahara, reaffirming that Sahrawi self-determination is the basis for resolving the conflict and backing African people's right to sovereignty and independence.
Morocco's Democratic Way party is calling for a democratic solution to the Western Sahara issue that respects the right to self-determination and prevents the region from being dragged into further war and prolonged conflict. The party also supports African people's struggles for sovereignty and independence, while condemning the imperialist exploitation of Africa's resources and the wars and conflicts fueled by foreign powers and their allied elites.
Morocco's diesel prices have risen again, nearing 15 dirhams, or about $1.50 per liter. The increase comes just weeks after a 1 dirham hike across fuel types, adding further pressure on households amid rising living costs. Sofian Kandaru with more now.
Moroccan motorists are facing another rise in fuel prices. A new adjustment took effect shortly before midnight on August 16th, barely 2 weeks after the previous increase. Diesel rose by 1 dirham, from 14.50 to 15.50 dirhams per liter. Gasoline also increased, reaching around 40.95 dirhams per liter, up from 14.30. The price of petrol, meanwhile, fell slightly to 15.25 dirhams. The latest increases are expected to add further pressure on household budgets, as higher transport costs, feed into the price of basic goods and services. The government has linked the adjustments to volatility in international refined fuel prices and supply conditions on the domestic market, but the issue has also renewed criticism of Morocco's energy policy. Since the closure of the Mohammedia refinery in 2015, Morocco has relied entirely on the import of refined petroleum products. This leaves domestic prices highly exposed to movements on international markets and puts additional pressure on the country's trade balance and foreign currency reserves. Beyond the latest figures, the price increases have revived a wider debate over the liberalization of Morocco's fuel market, the margins of distributors, and the role of public authorities in protecting purchasing power. For Moroccan consumers, the question is increasingly going beyond fluctuations in global oil prices and toward who ultimately bears the cost of a market heavily dependent on imported refined fuels.
Turning to Ukraine now, the war is seeing renewed escalation with deadly cross-border strikes reported on both sides. Russian authorities say 12 people were killed in Ukrainian attacks, while Ukraine reported 2 deaths and 3 injuries in Russian strikes on Zaporizhzhia. Meanwhile, Russia says its forces struck 2 cargo ships at Ukrainian Black Sea ports, Odessa and Mykolaiv. Moscow claims the vessels were being used to supply Ukrainian forces. And in Europe, the European Union is preparing to significantly expand sanctions on Russia in the coming months. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas says the bloc will unveil its broadest sanctions package yet this autumn, adding further pressure on Moscow's war effort. And finally, before we go, here's a quick look at some of the other major stories making headlines in our news in brief with Salman Asif this time.
French Labour Minister Jean-Pierre Frondeau acknowledged a record rise in the unemployment rate, which reached 8.3% in the final quarter of the year, attributing the increase mainly to the economic repercussions of the closure of the Straits of Hormuz. In an interview with Le Journal du Dimanche, the minister said that the unemployment rate had reached its highest levels in 7 years, reflecting a significant deterioration in the country's economic challenges. The death toll in Indonesia rose to 68 people following the earthquake that struck the country on Saturday. Authorities in the Flores region said that the most debris had been cleared from hard-to-reach areas and that roads had been reopened. They added that power outages had hampered search and rescue operations in several locations. The United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reported on Monday that 350 humanitarian workers were killed in 2025, including 186 in Gaza and 71 in Sudan. According to the organization, since the beginning of 2026, 82 humanitarian workers have been killed, 97 injured, and 38 abducted in different parts of the world. South Korea's Ministry of National Defense announced the start of joint military exercises with the United States. A ministry spokesperson said Monday that the Ultra Freedom Shield drills were proceeding as planned, aimed at strengthening the readiness of South Korean and U.S. forces to respond to potential threats.
Well, that's all for tonight, but to catch up on any report you miss or get the latest updates, you can always visit our social media platforms. I'm Islam Sid, signing off. Thank you for watching. See you next time.